Hey guys, this is Luke from Mix Made Simple, and today I'm going to be talking about how we can achieve really wide professional sounding mixes and how we can do that without having to use any stereo imaging plugin at all. Now I am going to get to a stereo image plugin later and I'm going to show you how I use it, but for most of the video what I'm going to talk about is how we can get that nice wide mix using good use of panning, delay, and also mid-side EQ. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is show you this diagram that I have here that represents a visual of what the stereo image is. And now a stereo image, basically, if you think about it visually, is just the sound coming out of your speakers. And so the way we can look at this is we can view it as tall, deep, and wide. So it is a 3D image. And so tall meaning the frequency range, the lowest lows to the highest highs. Deep meaning the volume and how we perceive something being close to us or far away. So a vocal might be really up front and close to us, and a pad or something else might feel like it's or sound like it's further back in the mix. And then finally we've got the width, which is what we're going to be talking about today. The width is the width of the stereo image, and so if I have something panned hard to the left, it's going to sound like it's coming from over here on the left side of my speaker. If I have something panned hard right, it's going to sound like it's coming from the very edge of the stereo image from the right, and then we've got everything in between. And then it's important to understand mono versus stereo. The basic idea is that mono is just one channel and stereo is if you had two channels. And so I'm going to show you an example in a second, but mono would be, it's going to sound like it's just right in the middle. And stereo, it's going to have more of a wide effect. You can kind of think of it like a flashlight versus like a lamp, if that makes sense. And I'm going to show you right now. And so I've got this track that I'm working on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play it just so we can hear what we're working with. And I'm going to go down to the master channel. And then on the master, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch back and forth between mono. So let's go ahead and listen to the track we're working with for a second, and then I'll go back and forth. Now this is mono, stereo, okay, so the first thing I want to show you is I can really quickly check to see if a synth is in mono or if it's got stereo information. And so if you take an EQ here on this pad, got this pad here, and I'm going to make sure it's not panned anywhere. So if you take, I've got it set up in mid-side mode already. Go down to right here, mid-side mode. And now, if you put it on side mode, which is all the information that's on the sides, check out what happens when I hit play. So nothing shows up, right? That's because this is in mono. So if I switch to mid, which is the stuff in the middle, the mono, now you can see it showing up. And so this pad is actually in mono. And so it's just something to keep in mind, because sometimes you might grab a pad from like Omnisphere or something and it sounds like really wide and lush to begin with, and that's because it's in stereo. And so sometimes with synthesizers, if you start adding effects to it or whatever, it like becomes stereo. And then like if you have a sample player, for example, it might be in stereo, and so you might already have that width that you already need without having to pan anything. But in this case, I'm going to show you how we can take two pads that are in mono, and they don't have to be in mono, but we can take two pads that sound different and how we can pan them left and right to kind of create that nice wide sound. Let's go ahead and do that right now. I've got two pads, they're both in mono, and what I'm going to do, they're two similar pads. I'm going to take one and I'm going to pan it hard left. You can see I've already done that. I've got a utility here. I'm going to take this other one and I'm going to pan it hard right. I've got that set up, and now if I play them both together, this is what they sound like. I'll turn the volume up just a little bit. And it's important to understand that you don't want to just take one single pad and then double it and then pan one left and one right, because then you're going to get phase cancellation. They're just going to cancel each other out, and all it will do is it'll just sound louder. It's not going to do anything to help you. Whenever you are let's say you're working with vocals, for example, you have the main vocal in the middle, and if you're going to pan, you want to double up the vocals and pan one hard left, one hard right, you need to have multiple recordings of the same vocal, because there are going to be little differences in each recording that's going to allow you to layer them and pan them so that they work well together. You can't just take one take, double it, and then it just doesn't work that way, okay? So that's something to also keep in mind. And so here with panning, I've done that with the pads, and if I play just these together, these instruments, you can tell that it's just a nice wide sound, okay? And the way I like to think about all of this, the stereo image, and I've got it in the diagram here, is almost like an upside down pyramid where you've got the sub bass and you've got the kick and bass in general just kind of in the center, and then we work our way upwards like that. And so you can see I've got claps here, right? Well, now if I go down to like claps here, when it kind of builds up, you don't necessarily always have to pan your claps like this, but you can have it pack claps right in the middle, but this is something you can do to kind of have more of a wide effect. So right here when the claps come in, let's go ahead and take a listen. What I've got is I've got one clap here that sounds like this, and then one that sounds like this, and then we layer them together. They sound like that, and then the drums all together. And so this is another way we're adding width, and then we're adding width to the drum section, okay? And so that's what you can do with panning, and it doesn't always have to be a hard left, hard right. For example, if I'm working with vocals, I might have duplicate vocals and have one just a little bit off to the left and then one a little bit off to the right. And that's just a way that you can pan things, a little bit here and there to fit everything into the stereo image like it's a puzzle. So that's a good way to think about it. And so that is panning, but now what I want to talk about is actually auto pan in Ableton. So it is use of panning, and this is a cool way to make it kind of like ear candy and kind of change it up for the listener and add some like cool effect. And so I've got this loop build-up kind of thing here, and I'll go ahead and I'll just skip ahead. But I've got an auto pan here, and now what this is doing is as this loop, this shaker is kind of going, it just goes back and forth. So go ahead and take a listen. So that's going back and forth, which creates an interesting effect for the listener and also adds some width because we are panning it far left and basically far right. Okay, so that's something else you can do. The next thing I want to talk about is delay, and specifically ping pong delay. I really like ping pong delay. I use ping pong delay most of the time, and what I have here set up here on this vocal is if I solo it, solo all the vocals, I've got the vocal running down to this vocal delay, this send and return, and I've got a compressor here doing some side chaining. And what this is doing is I'm side chaining it back up to the vocal. And so when the threshold is down like this, basically when the vocal's playing, the echo, the delay is not going to be coming in, but then when the vocal goes away, you'll start to hear the echo boy, the delay. And so I'm going to go ahead and play it, and then you'll hear it bounce back and forth.
Mind blown, many fears, worries you can let go. Dry your tears, promise I will stay close.
You hear that? That's really cool, right? And so that's a way that we can add width. And now if I play the whole thing together.
Mind blown, many fears, worries you can let go. Dry your tears,
It sounded nice and wide and sounding really good, okay? And so that's how we can do that. And then the next thing, before we get to stereo imaging that I want to talk about, is mid-side EQ. So with mid-side EQ, what we're essentially doing is we're having, I need to find this vocal loop. What we're doing is we're having control over the information that's on the sides, and then we're controlling the information that's in mono. And so if I go to this loop here, and I already have one set up. So if you take an EQ weight, what you can do is you put it on mid-side mode, and when you click, so this is on side, and this is on mid, and what you can do is now you've got control over everything in the middle. Now you've got control over everything on the side. And so if I go like this, if I solo this and just turn this off, let's go ahead and listen how it sounds. Now watch what happens when I turn this EQ on. So you can hear what I've done is I'm boosting the highs that are on the side. So it's kind of adding some crispness, but it's lifting up the volume a little bit of the side information. And then if I lower the volume in the mid, like the mono part, and it's kind of taking away some of that. So We're not really widening it here, but we're just playing with the side information volume versus the mono stuff, which kind of can create like the illusion that it's wider. Encourage you to explore using mid-side EQ because you can do a lot of cleaning up in your mix. Like if you had something that was too much on the side, well, you could go to the side and then you could turn it down, and it's a good way to clean up certain areas of your mix to make it sound better. And that's something that could be a topic for a whole other video. So I'm just going to let that go for now, but I wanted to show you this as a way of kind of creating that illusion more of a wider mix. So that's how you can add some width to your mix without using an imager at all. So if I go ahead and play this section, I'm not using any imager, no ozone or anything like that, and it's sounding really nice and wide and big. So let's take a listen. Okay, now that's sounding great, but what we can do here, I'm going to show you the two ways that I like to use an imaging plugin. And so if you go to the whole group itself, you can add some subtle, like if I take the ozone imager, let's just throw it on here just to illustrate the effect, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on the entire group here and then play it. And I'm going to click stereoize. Let's go really extreme. I'm realizing right now those pitch risers are a little bit too loud. I'll fix that later. So you can see that I like to use the stereo imager on the big group after I've already done everything that I can without using one. That way you don't want to just blast at full width because that's going to cause issues, especially if you're putting this on like multiple instruments or groups or whatever. So this is how I like to do it. I kind of view it as like the icing on the top of the cake, okay? So I'm just go ahead and just leave that down here. But then now, if I jump over here, and actually I probably wouldn't even do it on my full instrument group like that. I'd probably do it on like subgroups of instruments, like right here. Because now if we go over here, I'll show you another place I like to use it. So on the Korg M1 piano, which is in mono, go ahead and take a listen to this. Well, to make that sound more wide and nice, I'm going to go ahead and put the imager on, and so let's take a listen. And now I've got these layered with other instruments, and this is what they sound like all layered together, other pianos. And that's how it's sounding like that. So that's how I like to use stereo imaging plugins. And that's how I like to do things to get a nice wide mix, okay? What I would say is don't stress about getting something super wide. There's plenty of mixes out there that don't have that super wide sound, and they're still great tracks. So, it's not something that is super necessary, but if you want to get that wide sound, I would layer and do intentional use of panning and use ping pong delay. And then later on, after you've done all that stuff, you can consider using something like an ozone imager. Okay, so I hope that video helped. Once again, look in the description below for my free training video. And if you're an EDM producer and you're just wanting to get really, really good at this stuff a lot faster, go ahead and also look in the description below. You can book a call with me. We'll discuss getting you enrolled in my course, Mix Immersions. It's also a community and a place you can ask me questions anytime you want. So yeah, look in the description below for all that stuff, and I will see you guys again next time. All right, see ya.